Ever since NASA transmitted its lunar missions from 1969 to 1972 to millions worldwide, conspiracy theorists have engaged in extensive debates regarding the photographs and videos from these journeys. The fervor surrounding the question of whether the moon landings were fabricated is comparable in popularity to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy and the mysteries surrounding Area 51. Those who subscribe to the moon landing conspiracy theory meticulously examine every detail for discrepancies and possible government manipulation. They assert that NASA did not actually land on the moon. Rather, they contend that the agency staged a series of fake moon landings in a studio, utilizing props, astronaut costumes, and sophisticated lighting arrangements. The narratives surrounding a potential hoax emerged even before the actual landing took place. Once the initial capsules were placed in orbit, skepticism arose, with some individuals labeling the images as fabricated and the astronauts' accounts as untruthful. The underlying motivation appeared clear. John F. Kennedy had pledged to land a man on the moon within 10 years. While the United States may have lagged behind the Soviet Union in rocketry, it was significantly ahead in the realm of filmmaking. If we were unable to achieve a lunar landing first, we could at least create the illusion that we had succeeded.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Numerous theories can be traced back to a single individual, William Casing, who served as a technical writer for Rocketdyne, a company specializing in engine manufacturing. Although Casing departed from Rocketdyne in 1963, he remained deeply engrossed in the space program and its objectives, which were frequently articulated as a task on a Cold War agenda. The achievement of a man on the moon would signify the beginning of a new epoch. Casing regarded this feat as unachievable and beyond the capabilities of the technology available at the time. This perspective shaped his interpretation of every NASA announcement. Rather than observing the events as they unfolded, he sought to uncover how they had been orchestrated. Casing articulated his theories in a self-published book released in 1976. The title of the work encapsulates his assertion, "We never went to the moon," America's $30 billion swindle. He perceived himself as a whistleblower, aiming to expose what he believed to be a significant cover-up. Casing proposed a complex alternative theory regarding the Apollo missions. He suggested that the astronauts were removed from their spacecraft just prior to launch and transported to Nevada, where they subsequently broadcast the moon landing from a desert location a few days later. Witnesses reported seeing Neil Armstrong in a hotel lobby, accompanied by two showgirls, while Buzz Aldrin was allegedly engaged in playing slot machines. Following this, they were flown to Hawaii and reinserted into the capsule after the splashdown, but before the media arrived. This narrative inspired the film Capricorn 1. In the film, the capsule disintegrates upon re-entry, forcing NASA into a dire situation where they must eliminate the astronauts. James Brolin's character escapes, traverses the desert, and ultimately appears at his own funeral. This plot twist was said to reflect a more sinister element of the conspiracy theory, as some believe that the tragic fire during the Apollo 1 testing, which took the lives of astronauts Gus Grissom, Edward White II, and Roger Chaffee, was part of a cover-up intended to silence individuals who were on the verge of revealing the truth. During other periods, such theories would have been regarded as the ramblings of a lunatic. However, the 1970s in America marked a time of skepticism. It was during this decade that the once vibrant dream began to diminish, and the narratives we had been presented with started to resemble mere fairy tales. The very fabric of American history came under scrutiny and underwent revision. In essence, the space program, which originated in an era characterized by a strong belief in American exceptionalism, reached its conclusion in a markedly different context. For those people who gave credence to Casing's theory, the next logical question followed. Who, in 1969, would have been capable of staging a believable moon landing? Stanley Kubrick's seminal work, 2001, A Space Odyssey, premiered the previous year. He collaborated with the renowned science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke, who arguably had a greater influence on the aesthetics of our contemporary world than any scientist. The innovations of the man-made satellites, GPS, smartphones, and the space station were all foreseen by Clarke, who envisioned them long before they became reality. However, the narrative was not the primary takeaway for many viewers. Instead, it was the groundbreaking special effects that resonated, presenting a vision of the future that was strikingly clear and reminiscent of prophetic revelations. While George Orwell envisioned a future marked by oppression and totalitarianism, in the imaginations of Kubrick and Clarke, the future appeared radiant, intricate, and chillingly mechanical. The most remarkable aspect was the lunar scene, where a group of astronauts appearing almost post-human in their suits descends into an excavation site, once again bringing humanity into contact with the monolith. Although filmed in a studio, it possesses a realism that surpasses the actual moon landings. This effect is achieved through the interplay of shadow and light, the contrast between open space and confinement, and the manner in which the individuals move. Notably, there are no CGI or computer-generated effects. Everything is tangible, perhaps models, but still real physical objects. A genuine space station was present, and it indeed rotated. There was an authentic lunar surface strewn with rocks. This authenticity imparts a sense of weight that is often absent in contemporary films. For conspiracy theorists, it seems entirely plausible that NASA, recognizing its inability to land a man on the moon, sought the assistance of Kubrick. But what could have motivated his actions? It may have been a demonstration of patriotism, with a citizen responding to the urgent needs of their country. Alternatively, it might have been driven by financial incentives sufficient to fund every production from this point to Eyes Wide Shut. Another possibility is that he was under some form of coercion. The history of Hoover and the FBI is well documented. Regardless, it would have been a straightforward task, less costly and more expedient than the creation of 2001 itself. The theory posits that as time progressed, Kubrick's initial pride in his achievement gradually transformed into doubt, followed by feelings of guilt and ultimately shame. He experienced an overwhelming urge to confess. However, to whom could he reveal his truth? Public disclosure would likely lead to his disappearance, much like the many individuals who were privy to the realities surrounding the Kennedy assassination. Instead, he opted to express his confession through the medium he truly understood, which was film. This would be a veiled admission, concealed yet accessible to those with the perceptive insight to recognize it. It would serve as a marker for the work he had undertaken regarding the Apollo landing, which he had portrayed as fiction masquerading as history. In contrast, this new endeavor would present history cloaked in the guise of fiction. Which genre would he choose? He had already explored war with Paths of Glory, comedy with Lolita, an epic set in ancient times with Spartacus, and a political thriller with Dr. Strangelove. This left horror, an ideal fit for the narrative he needed to convey, the underlying story that resembled a nightmare. Scholars have observed the alterations Kubrick made to his source material, Stephen King's novel The Shining, which revolves around a haunted hotel and its winter caretaker along with his family. For instance, in the book The Room to be Avoided, the source of malevolent energy is room 217. Kubrick opted to change it to room 237. What could motivate such a modification? Perhaps it was due to the fact that the moon is, on average, 237,000 miles away from Earth. A significant portion of the connections between Stanley Kubrick and The Shining in relation to the moon landing is available online. A notable instance is the article titled "Secrets of The Shining, or How Faking the Moon Landing Nearly Cost Stanley Kubrick His Marriage and His Life," featured on the website of author and filmmaker Jay Weidner. The narrative commences with the Overlook Hotel, which symbolizes America. Once a magnificent establishment, it has fallen into disrepair. The caretaker, a writer named Jack Torrance, portrayed by Jack Nicholson, an artist akin to Kubrick, is tasked with upholding the facade, which represents the moon landing, while the very structure deteriorates. The individual who employs the caretaker is seated at a large desk, flanked by an American flag and an eagle representing the establishment. He reveals a harsh reality to the caretaker. Quote, "The site is purportedly situated on an Indian burial ground, and I believe they had to fend off several Indian attacks during its construction." End quote. This implies that the hotel, much like America itself, is built upon the remains of its original inhabitants. Subsequently, the hotel is belted by a winter storm, symbolizing the Cold War that compelled JFK to make the extravagant promise of sending a man to the moon. In the meantime, Jack Torrance is engaged in writing, producing a manuscript that ultimately serves as a testament to his unraveling psyche. This illustrates the toll that participation in a deception takes on the artist, necessitating a confession. Jack's writings, which reveal a chilling truth in the film, consist solely of the repetitive phrase, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." For the average viewer, this serves as a clear indication of insanity. However, for a conspiracy theorist, it may represent a deeper message. The phrase "all work," or the letters ALL or A11, could allude to Apollo 11. At one moment, Danny, the caretaker's son, speeds through the vast corridors on his big wheel, mirroring the hedge maze outside the hotel, a labyrinth in which the family finds themselves lost, much like the nation wandering through a confusing reality. He encounters two twin girls, which are eerie apparitions representing the spirits of children who met their demise at the hands of a former caretaker. The choice of twins is significant, as Apollo 11 followed the earlier Gemini mission, with Gemini symbolized by a pair of twins on the zodiac chart. The pivotal moment occurs when Danny dismounts his tricycle and ventures down the hallway, drawn by an enigmatic call reminiscent of a government summons to a filmmaker during a crisis. Notably, Danny is clad in an Apollo 11 sweater, which features a rocket above the words Apollo 11. As he stands, it appears as though the rocket is launching, although it is merely an illusion. Danny's walk symbolizes the rocket's ascent until he arrives at room 237. In this context, Danny embodies the child within Kubrick, the artist having journeyed to 237, which metaphorically represents a trip to the moon. Yet, in reality, he has not. Of course, all this sounds nonsensical to a sane person, but to a conspiracy theorist, it all makes perfect sense. On December 10, 2015, the website yournewswire.com published a video purportedly showing a film of Kubrick confessing to having helped NASA fake the Apollo program moon landings. This video has been circulating online since at least August 2015 and is one of several clips purportedly showing Kubrick talking about his alleged involvement in faking the U.S. moon landings. While there are various edits of this infamous and fake interview circulating on YouTube, the videos all originated from a new film from T. Patrick Murray titled Shooting Kubrick. Murray claimed on the Shooting Kubrick website that he was granted unprecedented access to interview the director in May 1999, which would have been quite an impressive feat since Kubrick had passed away 2 months earlier. Although the date could be a simple typographical error, that was not the only questionable aspect of the interview. The man being interviewed simply doesn't look or sound like Stanley Kubrick when compared to a video of the real Kubrick accepting the D.W. Griffith Award in 1997. Furthermore, unedited versions of the interview contain hints that the Stanley Kubrick in the video is an actor. In a since-deleted clip, the interviewer called his subject Tom and instructed him on how to tell the story.
Well, time was running out. It was 1969, and
but you met Nixon in '68ish, and he said, "We have a problem, Stanley. We can't get those boys up there." Tell me that story.
Right.
Okay, try again. So you met with Nixon?
there was a if you might remember, there was a launch pad accident in '67, which killed.
Tom, you're going to tell me a story. So Nixon sat me down in the Oval Office, and he says to me, "You know, that boy just died. I don't think this is how I want you. Then we're going to kneel. We're going to kneel. Yeah. When we go to kneel, you're telling me through kneel. This is our new template. It's going to be helpful to you. It's going to be helpful to you. So you're telling me the story through, and it's going to come to you like that." So Nixon sat me down, and he said, "It's impossible, Stanley, to get to the moon. It's impossible." And now his boy Gus just died.
You don't want me to mention this? The accident.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he said, "Stanley, that boy Gus, he died of a fiery death. You know,
Yeah.
Do you know what that would do to my approval ratings if those boys died in space? I mean, think about it, Stanley."
Right.
And you know, I thought about it, and he was right. And he said, "And those Ruskies, if we don't keep up with them, they're going to take over the world. And I'm no communist. And I know you're no communist, Stanley." I mean, it's just child's play. Just do it, okay? But bring us there.
A spokesman for Kubrick's widow proclaimed that the interview is a lie. Stanley Kubrick has never been interviewed by T. Patrick Murray. The whole story is made up, fraudulent, and untrue. On July 5, 2016, Kubrick's own daughter posted the following on Twitter. "Surely, an artist such as my father, whose profound degree of artistic integrity is self-evident, whose political and social consciousness is manifestly present in nearly every film he made, whose highly controversial subject matter literally put his life at risk, and yet he continued to make the films he made. Don't you think he'd be the very last person ever to assist the U.S. government in such a terrible betrayal of its people? There are many very real conspiracies that have happened throughout our history, are happening presently. I'm only too aware of the dreadful manipulations perpetrated by governments, secret services, banksters, the military-industrial complex, etc. But claims that the moon landings were faked and filmed by my father? I just can't understand it. How can anyone believe that one of the greatest defenders of mankind would commit such an act of betrayal? My father's artistic works are his unimpeachable defense. Finally, my love for my father notwithstanding, I actually knew him. I lived and worked with him, so forgive my harshness when I state categorically the so-called truth these malicious cranks persist in forwarding. That my father conspired with the U.S. government to fake the moon landings is manifestly a grotesque lie. As recently as the summer of 2024, the Kubrick moon landing conspiracy was addressed again by Hollywood. In the movie Fly Me to the Moon, the creators crafted a narrative around filming a backup fake moon landing. Apparently, the Nixon administration gets anxious about Apollo 11 and devises a backup plan in case it fails. It is called Project Artemis, and it involves staging a fake moon landing that will be broadcast on TV should the real mission fail. One of the main characters is a marketing specialist named Kelly Jones, who is poached by Nixon operative Mo Burkus to peddle the Apollo 11 space mission being led by NASA launch director Cole Davis. Once Mo solicits Kelly's help with Project Artemis, she reluctantly agrees to the ruse and enlists director Lance Vespertine, whom she refers to as the Kubrick of commercials, for the assignment of a lifetime. Of course, the creators of the film admit to all of this being a tongue-in-cheek element of the movie, but it demonstrates how the conspiracy is still alive and well 50-plus years after the first landing. So, is there any truth at all to this conspiracy theory? Well, as it relates to Stanley Kubrick, the conspiracy theory fails 100%. It is merely a face in the clouds. However, it may seem more authentic than actual reality, as if you are uncovering what has long been concealed. This is the allure of conspiracy theories, which can evolve into an obsession and a mode of existence. Logically speaking, if in fact the main motivation for believing in the moon hoax is you don't trust the government, or you don't trust our leaders, or you don't trust authority, how do you trust the 400,000 people that worked on the program to keep their mouths shut for 50 years? The fact is that denial of America's great progress in space exploration is more of an ideological thing, a political thing, than it is a scientific thing. To those who know the moon landing was real, conspiracy theories saying it was a hoax may seem silly and innocuous. But their consequences aren't. They spread misinformation and make people susceptible to other false theories. You will generally find these folks also well acquainted with the so-called flat earth theory. For those viewers who may remain cognitively dissonant and persist this conspiracy is true, here is some hard science about filmmaking in the 1960s that should put the matter to rest for any reasonably sane person. Here are some of the most common beliefs and questions and why they don't hold up. Claim 1. The moon landings were filmed in a TV studio. There are two different ways of capturing moving images. One is film, actual strips of photographic material onto which a series of images are exposed. Another is video, which is an electronic method of recording onto various mediums, such as moving magnetic tape. With video, you can also broadcast to a television receiver. A standard motion picture film records images at 24 frames per second, while broadcast television is typically either 25 or 30 frames, depending on where you are in the world. If we go along with the idea that the moon landings were taped in a TV studio, then we would expect them to be 30 frames per second video, which was the television standard at the time. However, we know that video from the first moon landing was recorded at 10 frames per second in SSTV slow scan television with a special camera. Claim 2. They used the Apollo special camera in a studio and then slowed down the footage to make it look like there was less gravity. Some people may contend that when you look at people moving in slow motion, they appear to be in a low-gravity environment. Slowing down film requires more frames than usual, so you start with a camera capable of capturing more frames in a second than a normal one. This is called overcranking. When this is played back at the normal frame rate, this footage plays back for longer. If you can't overcrank your camera but you record at a normal frame rate, you can instead artificially slow down the footage, but you need a way to store the frames and generate new extra frames to slow it down. At the time of the broadcast, magnetic disc recorders capable of storing slow motion footage could only capture 30 seconds in total for a playback of 90 seconds of slow motion video. To capture 143 minutes in slow motion, you'd need to record and store 47 minutes of live action, which simply wasn't possible. Claim 3. They could have had an advanced storage recorder to create slow motion footage. Everyone knows NASA gets the tech before the public. Well, maybe they did have a super secret extra storage recorder, but one almost 3,000 times more advanced is absurd. Claim 4. They shot it on film and slowed down the film instead. You can have as much film as you like to do this, then they converted the film to be shown on TV. Although this is the most logical claim regarding the actual recording of the landing, shooting it on film would require thousands of feet of film. A typical reel of 35mm film at 24 frames per second lasts 11 minutes and is 1,000 foot long. If we apply this to 12 frames per second film, which is as close to 10 as we can get with standard film, running for 143 minutes, this is how long the Apollo 11 footage lasts. You would need 6.5 reels. These would then need to be put together. The splicing joints, transfer of negatives, and printing, and potentially grains, specks of dust, hairs, or scratches would instantly give the game away. There are none of these artifacts present, which means it wasn't shot on film. When you take into account that the subsequent Apollo landings were shot at 30 frames per second, then to fake those would be 3 times harder. So the Apollo 11 mission would have been the easy one,